also on Canada and Mexico, who are not seen as adversaries under any circumstances whatsoever. Joining me now is the Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland. He's a member of the Senate Appropriations, Foreign Relations, and Budget Committees. Again, just like Andrea, somebody who, if I have on the show, I have so many things I want to talk to you about, Senator. But let's talk about this one, because this is getting hot right now. Canada and Mexico imposing retaliatory tariffs. We had, I think it was Kristi Noem saying that if prices go up for Americans, it's because of other countries reacting to our tariff policy. That's just nonsense. I think you just need to read a pamphlet on tariffs to understand that that's just not how it works.
Well, Ali, that's right. This is pretty simple math, right? When you have a big tariff increase on countries, in this case, Canada, Mexico, and some on China, it's the American people who are going to pay the price. You know, President Trump, as candidate Trump, this is going to do just the opposite. We're going to see increased costs on, fruits and vegetables. We're going to see increased costs across the board. And that's even before we see the damage resulting from the retaliatory tariffs, right? Which will help hurt American businesses who are trying to export to these countries. So this is effectively a big sales tax increase on the American people.
Let's talk about retaliation. There are two forms of it. One is retaliatory tariffs, which Canada and Mexico have both said they'll do. Last time we got into this thing, we ended up subsidizing American soybean farmers to the extent of $28 billion. So again, comes out of our tax money if we have to subsidize. The Premier of Ontario has just announced this morning that as of tomorrow morning, no American alcohol will be for sale in Ontario. Not tariffs. They're not adding to the price. It will not be sold in Canada. So there are all these breweries and distilleries and winemakers across America who are now suddenly going to lose access to Canada's biggest market altogether and are going to have to find somewhere else to sell their wine or their bourbon or their beer. This costs you twice.
That's exactly right. Look, this is a double whammy. It has the effect of increasing prices for Americans here. And then, of course, it damages those businesses, like you just mentioned, beer and wine. And I'm glad, Ali, you raised the issue of the federal subsidies to soybean farmers, because what happened was when Trump, in his first term, imposed those tariffs on some Chinese products, the reality was China's retaliatory tariffs prevented a lot of U.S. exports from being, and we paid, the federal government, the federal taxpayer, the American people ended up paying tens of billions of dollars in subsidies to big farmers. So at the end of the day, it's the American taxpayer and American people who are going to pay dearly for this stupid move.
Talk to me about, we're 13 days into the new Trump administration, and this isn't the first time Trump has used tariffs as a threat or used them before. He's followed through on it this time in a way that is unprecedented. But we did see how it unfolded with Colombia about a week ago, in which the threat of tariffs are leverage for something else. Sometimes they're leverage for a better trade deal. Sometimes they're leverage for whatever Trump actually wants to achieve. For a moment, and don't waste too much time on this because it's probably not worth the brain cells, but for a moment, is there a strategy here that we may be missing? Is there something that Donald Trump's trying to achieve that doesn't have anything to do with actual tariffs?
I don't see that. I mean, take Canada, for example. It's just not clear what the president's end game is with Canada. There's not an immigration issue. There's not a big fentanyl issue with respect to Canada. So the president is just using these so-called emergency powers to levy tariffs. But the price will be paid by the American people. And without a strategy behind it, this is just folly.
There is some complexity in talking. These are our three biggest trading partners, Canada, Mexico, and China. But there's complexity in lumping them all together. Because, as you said, we have the fewest issues with Canada. There are a few more with Mexico, largely because of the southern border. And there are many with China. And even China's complicated because it's adversary in some cases and ally in some cases. Lumping these things all together does them all a disservice, does our relationships and our trade relationships with all three countries a disservice.
Look, it does. And certainly treating Mexico and Canada like adversaries sends a terrible message. I mean, the highest increases in tariffs were on them. China, as you know, we already have tariffs on them. But look, I'm in favor of strategic targeted tariffs, right, to protect key sectors, semiconductors,
right,
steel. I mean, these are important sectors, but across the board tariffs are simply a tax hike on the American people. And they're going to be feeling it pretty soon because, Trump promised exactly the opposite.
Senator, good to talk to you as always. Thank you.
This is a prelude. This is also a prelude to a big tax break that the president is planning for the wealthiest people. So I can tell you, Elon Musk he's not going to feel the impact of the price increases from these tariffs. And then he's going to get a huge tax break windfall. So this is a betrayal of all the people that President Trump said he wanted to help.
Your eggs are not getting cheaper, and the cost of cooking those eggs is about to get more expensive because we now have a tariff on the energy that we're getting from Mexico and Canada. Senator, good to see you as always. Thank you. Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen.